Two, my Amish brother confessed he loved my wife. I was told to stay silent. My name is Joseph Byler, and I am 61 years old now. The first thing I remember about the night my brother spoke is that Rebecca would not look at me when I came in from the barn. She was standing at the sink, her back straight, her sleeves rolled to the elbow, and the water was running long after the last dish had been rinsed. I asked her if supper had gone cold. She said it had not. I asked her where Eli was. She said he had walked home through the south field. I asked her why she was crying. She told me she was not crying, and then she shut off the tap, dried her hands on the same cloth twice, and walked past me up the stairs, without touching my shoulder, the way she had touched it every night for 11 years. That was a Thursday in October. By Sunday, the bishop had been to our house twice. By the following Thursday, I had been told 3 separate times, by 3 separate men, that I was not to repeat what my brother Eli had said in our kitchen. And by the time the first snow fell, I understood that the confession itself was not the thing they were afraid of. The thing they were afraid of was what I might do once I learned why he had said it. I want to tell this carefully, because for 30 years I told it wrong, even to myself. I grew up the older of 2 brothers in a district outside Mount Hope, in a settlement that kept the old ways more strictly than most. My father was a quiet man with a bad back and a softer temper than the community expected of him. My mother was the louder force in the house, not loud in voice, but loud in decision. She decided when we ate, when we prayed, when we forgave, and when we did not. Eli came along 4 years after me. He was the kind of child who watched a room before he entered it. I was the kind who walked in first and learned the cost afterward. I married Rebecca Yoder the spring I turned 24. She was from a district 2 counties over, and her family was considered plain even by our standards. Her father had hands like split wood, and a habit of looking at the floor when he spoke. Rebecca had her mother's eyes, a brown so dark you could not always tell where she was looking, and a way of laughing only after she had decided you meant the joke kindly. I knew the first time I sat beside her at a singing that I would not feel settled in any other house but the one she lived in. Eli was 19 then. He stood up with me at the wedding. He held the hymnal level when my hands began to shake during the vow. Afterward, when the long tables were being cleared and the women were carrying bowls back to the kitchen, he found me out behind the buggy shed and gripped my shoulder hard. "You will be good to her," he said. It was not a question. It was not a blessing either. I have thought about that sentence for 40 years. The first 11 years of our marriage were the good years, and I will not pretend they were anything else. Rebecca and I had 3 children, Mary, then Aaron, then little Hannah, who came late and small and stayed small. We built our house on the back acreage of my father's farm, close enough that Eli could walk over for supper any night of the week, and most nights he did. He never married. My mother fretted over it the way some women fret over weather. She would corner him after services and list the names of unmarried girls in nearby districts, the way other women listed groceries. Eli would nod and thank her, and the next Sunday he would be back at our table, helping Rebecca pour cider for the children, listening to Aaron read a verse aloud. I thought he was lonely. I thought he liked being part of a family, even one that was not his own. I thought a great many things that were partly true and entirely insufficient. The first warning was so small I am almost ashamed to call it one. It was a Tuesday in early autumn, and I had come in from the backfield earlier than expected because the team had thrown a trace. Rebecca was at the table with Eli, and they were not speaking. They were only sitting. A cup of coffee sat between them, untouched, and Rebecca's sewing was folded in her lap without a needle in it. When I came through the door, Eli stood up too quickly, said something about checking the calves, and was gone before I had taken off my hat. Rebecca said, "He came to ask after your mother," and then she picked up her sewing and pushed the needle through the cloth as if she had been working all along. I did not ask further. A husband who asks further is a husband who does not trust, and in our community a man who does not trust is a man who has already failed. I told myself my brother and my wife were close because I was close to both of them, and that closeness between good people should not be a thing a man fears. The second warning came the following spring, and it was my mother who delivered it, though she did not know that was what she was doing. We were standing at her kitchen window watching the children chase a barn cat across the yard, and she said, without turning, "Eli should not eat at your table so often, Joseph." I asked her why. She said, Because a man without a wife begins to imagine he has one. I laughed. I remember laughing. She did not laugh with me. She wiped her hands on her apron and said, "I have told him the same. He does not listen to me. Perhaps he will listen to you." I never said a word to Eli. I told myself my mother was anxious, in the way mothers are anxious about unmarried sons. I told myself she was wrong about what she had seen, because she had not actually seen anything, only sensed it, the way she sensed rain in her bad knee. The third warning was Rebecca herself, and this is the one I have spent the most years forgiving myself for missing. It was the summer Hannah turned 4. Rebecca had been thin and tired since the baby's birth, and the doctor in town, we used him only when the midwife shook her head, had told her plainly that there would be no more children. Rebecca took the news quietly. She told me on the porch after supper, and I held her hand and told her 3 children was a generous gift, and she said yes, it was. Then she said something I did not understand at the time. She said, "Joseph, if anything ever happens to me, you must not let your mother raise Hannah." I asked her what she meant. She said, "Promise me, not your mother, not Eli either. Promise me my sister Anna will take her." I promised. I would have promised her anything that night. But I went to bed wondering why Eli's name had been spoken in the same breath as my mother's, as if the two of them belonged to the same warning. I did not wonder long. There was hay to bring in, and a roof to patch, and a buggy axle that was older than Aaron, and the warnings of women in our community were treated, by the men in our community, as weather. You noticed it. You did not change your plans for it. The Thursday in October came 8 years later. Eli had been at supper. He had eaten less than usual. He had not teased Aaron about the boy's growing feet, which had become a small ritual between them. After the children had been sent upstairs, Rebecca had risen to clear the dishes, and Eli had said, very quietly, "Joseph, sit." "I have something to tell you." Rebecca went still at the sink. She did not turn around. Eli sat across from me and folded his hands on the table, the way our father had folded his during the worst conversations of our childhood. He said, "I have loved Rebecca for 19 years. I have never spoken to her of it. I have never touched her. I have never written her a letter. But I have loved her, and I cannot eat at this table again until you know it." The clock on the wall kept moving. Rebecca did not turn. I could see her shoulders, and the shoulders were not the shoulders of a woman hearing something for the first time. They were the shoulders of a woman who had known for 19 years, and had carried it without help. I asked Eli, "Does she know?" He said, "She has always known. She has never given me any reason to hope. She married you, Joseph. She chose you. I am telling you because the bishop instructed me to." That was the first place the ground moved beneath me. The bishop had instructed him. I asked when he had spoken to the bishop. He said 3 days before. I asked why. He said because he had begun to believe that staying silent any longer would be the greater sin, and he had gone to ask which sin to commit. I sat at that table for a long time after Eli walked out. Rebecca eventually turned from the sink. Her face was the color of skim milk. She said, "Joseph, I am sorry. I did not know how to tell you what I did not do." I asked her if she had ever loved him back. She said, "I have loved him as a sister loves a brother. Nothing more. But I knew, and I did not tell you, because telling you would have cost him his place in this family, and I did not believe I had the right." I went out to the barn. I sat on an overturned bucket until the lantern burned low. I tried to feel anger, and I could not find it. I tried to feel betrayal, and what I found instead was something more confusing, a sense that 3 people I trusted had been holding the same heavy thing for almost 2 decades, and not one of them had asked me to help carry it. The bishop came the next morning. His name was Amish Troyer, and he had baptized me, and he had married me, and he had buried my father 2 winters before. He sat in my kitchen with his hat on his knee and told me what I was to do. I was not to speak of Eli's confession to anyone, not to Rebecca's family, not to my mother, not to Aaron, who was nearly grown and would soon ask questions. The matter had been handled in the manner of the church. Eli would not eat at our table again. Eli would move to a settlement in Indiana where our father had cousins, and he would not return for any reason short of death. If anyone asked why, I was to say that Eli had felt called to help the cousins with their dairy. I asked Bishop Troyer why the silence. He said, "Because the confession is finished, Joseph. To speak of it again is to keep the sin alive." I asked him why my brother had been instructed to confess to me at all, if I was then to be told to forget it. The bishop looked at me for a long moment. He said, "There are things a brother owes a brother. The confession was one. The forgetting is another." I said I would try. He said, "Trying is not what is required. Obedience is." Eli left for Indiana before the first snow. He did not come to say goodbye. He sent a short letter, which I burned in the kitchen stove without reading past the second line. Rebecca stood beside me while I burned it. She did not ask what it said. She put her hand on the small of my back, and she left it there until the paper was gone. For 3 years, I did what Bishop Troyer told me to do. I did not speak of it. I did not write to Eli. When my mother asked after him, I gave her the line about the dairy in Indiana, and she nodded as if she had expected exactly that answer. When Aaron asked, much later, why his uncle never came home for Christmas, I told him Eli was a man who had chosen his work over his family, and Aaron, being 17, accepted this as the kind of disappointment grown men were allowed. But silence is not the same as peace. I had been told the two were related. They are not. I began to notice things. My mother, who had told me 8 years earlier that Eli should not eat at my table, never once asked why he had stopped. She did not write to him. She did not mention his name at family gatherings. A mother does not stop speaking of her younger son unless she has been given a reason, and no one had told her the reason. Or so I had been led to believe. The next thing I noticed was that Rebecca's sister Anna, the one Rebecca had named on the porch the summer Hannah was 4, came to visit twice a year now, where before she had come only at Christmas. She and Rebecca would sit on the porch in the evening and speak in low voices, and when I approached, the conversation would lift into ordinary things: weather, jam, the price of feed. The third thing was the bishop himself. 2 years after Eli left, Bishop Troyer asked me, after a service, how Rebecca was. I told him she was well. He nodded, and then he said, "She is a good woman, Joseph. She has carried more than most." And he walked away before I could ask what he meant. It took me until the 5th year to ask Rebecca plainly what the bishop had known that I did not. We were sitting on the porch. Hannah was 9 then, and asleep upstairs. I asked Rebecca whether anything had happened, ever, between her and Eli that she had not told me. She said no. I believed her. I still believe her. Then I asked whether anything had happened between Eli and anyone else. Rebecca was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Joseph, your brother loved me because he could not love the person he wanted to love. I knew that the first year of our marriage. I think your mother knew it before either of us." I asked her what she meant. She told me. She told me carefully, the way a person tells a thing she has carried for 19 years without help. She told me that Eli, the summer before I married, had asked her something on the road home from a singing. Not whether she would have him, but whether she thought a man could love a woman the way a brother is supposed to love a sister, and nothing more, and still be considered whole by God. She had said yes. She had said it because she understood, even at 20, that he was not asking about her. She had understood that Eli was telling her, in the only way our community allowed, that there was someone he could not name. A man, she believed. A boy he had grown up beside. Someone in our district who had married a year before I did, and whose name Eli had stopped speaking around the same time. Rebecca told me that Eli, over the years, had come to imagine that the safest love he could permit himself was the love of his brother's wife, a love that could never be consummated, never be requited, and never be acted upon, and which therefore protected him from the love he was actually afraid of. She told me she had been the wall between Eli and a confession that, in our community, would have cost him not a settlement in Indiana, but his place in any settlement at all. She told me Bishop Troyer had known. He had known for years. The Indiana cousins were not cousins. They were a quieter district where a single man could live out his life unmarried and unquestioned. The silence I had been ordered to keep was not to protect me from the shame of being a cuckolded brother. It was to protect Eli from being shunned for the thing he had never quite said. I sat on that porch for a long time after Rebecca finished. Hannah's window was open above us, and the curtain moved a little in the night air. I thought about my mother, who had warned me 8 years before the confession came, and who had stopped speaking of her son the day he left. She had known. Perhaps she had always known. Perhaps the warning at her kitchen window had not been about Eli loving Rebecca at all. Perhaps it had been the only language she had to tell me, to be gentle with my brother, before the rest of the community forced him into the only confession he was permitted to make. I asked Rebecca why she had not told me sooner. She said because it was not my secret to tell, and because I thought, if I told you, you would feel you had been used as a hiding place. And I did not want you to feel that. I have thought in the years since about each of the people who held a piece of that secret. Eli, who confessed a love he did not feel in order to keep silence about a love he did. Rebecca, who let herself be named as the object of his confession because she understood it would protect him. Bishop Troyer, who could not have spoken the true reason aloud without being required, by his office, to act on it. My mother, who saw her younger son clearly and chose, in her hard, quiet way, to send him somewhere he might survive. And me, who was told to stay silent, without ever being told what the silence was for. I am not certain who among us was the betrayer. I have spent decades trying to assign that word, and it will not stay where I put it. Eli betrayed me by letting me believe, for years, that my brother had loved my wife. Rebecca betrayed me by keeping his secret before she kept mine. The bishop betrayed me by ordering my obedience without telling me what I was obeying. My mother betrayed me by trusting that I would be wise enough to forgive a thing she would not name. And I betrayed myself, perhaps most of all, by accepting silence in place of understanding for as long as I did. Eli died in Indiana 11 years after he left. He was 47. The letter came from a man who signed himself only as a friend and who said my brother had asked, before the end, that I be told he had not been unhappy. I read the letter twice. I burned this one too, but slowly, and I read every line before the fire took it. Rebecca is gone now as well. She passed 4 winters ago, in her sleep, with her hand near mine on the quilt. Hannah came home for the funeral, with her own children. Aaron stood beside me at the grave. Bishop Troyer was long buried by then. My mother was buried beside my father in the same row. I am the last one who knows. I have told you because I am 61, and because the silence I was ordered to keep was a silence about a man who deserved, at the end of his life, to have someone in this family say plainly that he was loved. Not the love he confessed in my kitchen. The other one. The one he could not name. He was my brother, and he was made the way he was made, and the community I was raised in had no place for him except a quieter district and a borrowed story. The thing I understand now, that I could not understand then, is that the confession was never the betrayal. The betrayal was that we lived in a house, all of us, where the only way a man could ask for help was to lie about who he loved, and the only way the rest of us could help him was to agree to the lie, and to call it obedience, and to never speak of him again. I am speaking of him now. His name was Eli Byler. He was the kind of child who watched a room before he entered it. He held the hymnal level for me the day I married Rebecca, and he was not telling me what I thought he was telling me when he gripped my shoulder behind the buggy shed and said I would be good to her. He was asking me to be good to him too, in the only language he had. I hope, wherever he is, that he knows I finally heard him.